This video we'll be discussing how to add two real numbers using our sign rules. So to recap, the first rule is that if you are adding two numbers with the same sign, you are going to add their absolute values, and then you're going to use their common sign. So if they're both negative, the answer would be negative, and if they are both positive, then the answer would be positive. If you are adding two real numbers with different signs, this time you will subtract their absolute values, and you will give the answer with the same sign as the number with the larger absolute value. So I'll show you examples of both of these so that everyone has a good idea of how this works. So here we go. Example A, -6 plus -11. Both of these are negative numbers, so I know my answer will be negative. And I'm going to put a set of parentheses to indicate that I'm using the rule. And the rule when they are both negative, when they have the same sign, is to add their absolute values. So I'm going to add, and I'm going to do the absolute value of the larger plus the absolute value of the small. So here we go. Absolute value of -11 is 11. Absolute value of -6 is 6. So there's my rule. Kept the sign, added the absolute values. So my final answer would be -17. Next example, this time I have a positive number and a negative number, so I have different signs. So the rule says to keep the sign of the number with the largest absolute value, which is 6.7, so that's positive, so my answer will be positive. Again, put my set of parentheses, and because they have different signs, I'm going to subtract their absolute values. So again, I'm going to do the large one, so the absolute value of 6.7 minus, again, subtract their absolute values. Absolute value of -2.8 is 2.8. So if you would like at this point, you can put this in your calculator. You have shown me that you know the rule. So go ahead and put 6.7 minus 2.8 in your calculator, and your answer will be positive 3.9. And again, there's no need to write that positive sign. We just assume that those numbers are positive. All right, so now let's try some examples as well. Same thing, but this time we're going to use some fractions. Okay, so if we look at example C, we have -4.4 plus -3/2. So the first thing I notice is it's really hard to compare these to see which one. I mean, they're obviously both the same sign, but we're going to be adding fractions, which means that we need a common denominator. So before I do anything else, I'm going to get those common denominators. So look at 3, look at 2. They're both prime numbers, so I know I can multiply them together. So my common denominator is going to be 6. So I'm going to set up my problem. Here we go. This fraction we need to multiply by 2, so that would give me -8/6. This is my equivalent fraction. And this fraction multiplied by 3, I would get -9/6. So now it's a little bit easier to compare and see what's going on. So again, same sign. I'm going to keep that sign, put my parentheses, and then I'm going to add their absolute values. Largest plus smallest. All right, so there again is the rule, showing that I understand the rule. Then I'm going to go ahead and add those two fractions, which is 9 plus 8 is 17. I'm going to keep the denominator. 17 is a prime number, so that means I can't simplify this. 6 does not go into 17 evenly, so this is my final answer, -17/6. Example D, this time we have a positive plus a negative. Again, we need that common denominator. So before I even start, I'm going to rewrite these two fractions with the common denominator. 8 and 6. The common denominator is 24, so I'm going to keep 24, rewrite both of these. The first fraction I'll have to multiply by 3, which gives me 21/24, and the second fraction I would have to multiply by 4, so that would give me -20/24. So now it's much easier to compare. Now we can see that the positive number is the larger number when we look at their absolute values. So different signs means we keep the sign of the larger number, which is positive, and I need to subtract their absolute values. So my final answer will be keep the denominator, subtract, and we keep the positive sign. So my final answer is 1/24.